that two events happened at the one-room schoolhouse I used to go to. It concerned lost coins. There was one coin that was lost and then found, and then there was another coin that was lost a long time ago and it was found. It's a good lesson in this. But to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, I had an uncle, Uncle Elmer, who lived in Detroit. He came once in a while up to Canada to visit with his relatives. He was supposed to be at our place, my aunt's place, 2 weeks before he got there. But he had his own time schedule. And when he came, he brought a friend who was a magician. And he said that he wanted to have a show for us. Now, we were in the country, fairly isolated. We never had anything like that before because he had performed in front of some of the best magicians in the world. And so we all gathered and we're all excited about, he'd take a coin here and then he'd find it under your ear, etc., etc. He was a boxer. His hands were really fast. His hands are faster than you could see, and he also distracted you. And afterwards we went up to our aunt's and we had supper, and he gave me a Mexican coin. Worthless, really. But for me, it was very, very valuable. And I showed people, I carried it all around, I bragged a little bit about it, and then guess what? I lost it. In about half an acre. You think I could find that coin in a half an acre? I finally gave a reward of 10 to 25 cents, I can't remember, and someone found it, and I had great rejoicing. But the other one is simply that we were having a PD day, and we gathered. So before we gathered, we had to have some practice, and so we had to dig a pit for high jump. As I was digging the pit, I caught something in the corner of my eye. You know what it was? A 1913 big copper coin with a hole in it. Somebody had lost it. Now, I had great joy in finding it, but can you imagine a person who lost it? That thing used to be worth a lot of money at one time. And so Jesus talks about the lost coin. And there's lessons to learn from it. We'll look at it from 5 different aspects of it. As we do, we go through the scripture, which is a very short one. And the first one is simply this, the table with Jesus. We learned that Jesus basically was eating. Because Jesus said simply, or it was said to Jesus, he eats with sinners and he welcomes them. We don't exactly know what was happening, but probably he wasn't in a house, and he's probably out in the open. They were probably eating, and people came along, prostitutes and tax collectors, the outcasts of society. Jesus invited them to come and eat with him and the disciples. And Pharisees and the scribes didn't like that, and they simply said, "Look what this man is doing. He's eating with the outcasts. How can he be so casual with these people who are unclean?" And Jesus tells 3 parables. Last week we learned about the parable of the lost sheep. How Jesus seeks us. We don't seek him, he seeks us. Now we have the lost coin. And it has a lesson to teach us, which we'll get to. And then there's, in chapter 15, another parable. And it talks about a lost son, and then a lost brother. We must understand that Jesus wants to be at the table with us as well, and he invites us. He invites us to sup with him. He says, "Open the door. I will come in, sup with you, and you with me." got your attention. At least half of one of the females, yeah. When you think about it, Jesus told a parable, very simple. And the parable was this: that a woman had 10 coins. She lost one of them. She sought them, found that coin, and then she rejoiced. That's a simple story, a story that really in reality we don't think very much of. But it was mind-boggling and breaking all the rules when it came to Jesus' day, because women were really not considered to be considered as humans because we were made in God's image, but they were lower class people. And what Jesus is doing simply is this, and we learn from Luke. He talks about women. And in the scriptures it talks about the witness of the resurrection. The first ones were the women. And he's talking to people who were very religious. They were very strict. If they touched a woman, they would be unclean. In fact, some of the Pharisees, so they wouldn't have to look on a woman, would bind their eyes so they couldn't see them. Can you imagine walking around like that? I'd kill myself. And so Jesus said, there's a woman who lost coins. And he tells us that we're more precious than silver. And that's really important to remember. When we look at these three parables together, you have a certain ratio. 100 sheep, you lost one. You had 10 coins, you lost one. You had one son or two sons and you found one. One came back. We're special. Everybody in the world is special because they're made in God's image, after His likeness. So God does see us as special and responsible to Him. But He also, we find in scriptures, He has His chosen people. Before the creation of the world, God chose in love a people for Himself. And we were so special to Him that He sent His Son, Jesus, into the world. He took upon human flesh. He dwelt among us. He was obedient to us, obedient to the Father. And then He died on the cross, taking our place. So if you think to yourself, I'm not special, if you think sometimes I'm no good, think of what Christ has done for you. He's made us in His image. He died on the cross for you out of love. And He's still working in your lives. But then there's the lost part. Tell me, did that coin find itself? No, just laid there. Have you, it's just laid there because the coin can't find himself. And we find the very same thing happening with us. Somebody needs to seek and find us. We don't seek God. We don't try to be found. Because we have our own idols. You know what an idol is? An idol is taking something that's pleasurable in this world and making it more ultimate than God. And an idol's always going to fail. Whether that idol is success, money, reputation, family, work, an idol will fail. But we always are worshiping something. we're either worshiping the true God or an idol. People get mixed up in certain things. One of them is this. We make a distinction between a non-religious person and a religious person. I once went to school in Ontario Forest Technical School in Dorset. And one of the people lived beside me in the next room was a Dutchman called Tulip. And he was an atheist, at least he claimed to be an atheist. And after a while I got tired of him talking that way, so I went into his room and I said, "You have a God." He said, "I certainly don't have a God." Finally, I said, "Your God is money, isn't it?" And he said, "Yes, it is. We manufacture gods." And then there's the religious people. Like go to church most of their lives, and maybe not. But they've got this idea that they have to make themselves right with God. That's what the Pharisees were trying to do. They were trying to do all these ritual washings, and they memorized scriptures, and they memorized Mistra, which was part of how to interpret the Bible. They knew all that. But they missed it. Because Christianity is all about grace. I'm not talking about a person, I'm talking about mercy. The woman went and she sought to find the coin, didn't she? God seeks us. And he finds us, even though we're not worthy to be found. And so we had the woman. And she begins to seek, but to understand something about what's happening, we have car garages, under our house. You take one of those, that would be their house, maybe smaller. It would be dark and dingy inside, and the floor would be dirt covered or have flagstones on it. And that's where he lost the coin. Have you ever lost anything? Have you had a hard time finding it? Did you tear your house apart? And then just sort of tore your hair out saying, "I can't find it"? That's what that woman was doing. But she didn't give up. She didn't give up because it was a drachma. Well, one day's wages, today's probably $100 or more, depending on inflation, especially the way our Canadian dollar is going right now. And that was her savings. That was her retirement. That's why she wanted to find it, so she didn't give up. Have you ever given up looking for something? I think we all have at one time or another. Then when we gave up, then sometimes we found it, right? But God never gives up. He seeks us, and he finds us. Have you ever heard of a man called Francis Thompson? He's a poet. Actually, he was a Christian, but he was also addicted to heroin. Late 1890s. And so his Christian friends would find him, and they'd clean him up. And he'd be okay for a while, then he'd go back, and they'd find him in the gutter again. But he's a really brilliant man. And Oxford Press published his poem, 181 lines. You know what the name of it was? The Hound of Heaven. And when you have somebody reading it properly, it's just like a hound coming after you, and it's God. God seeks us sometimes as a hound Sometimes he seeks us very gently. Sometimes he makes us stop and think. Other times he is so loving and compassionate, he draws us to himself. And when he does, what happens is this. We're changed from the inside out. Holy Spirit works in our lives, and we have new birth, and we become his sons and his daughters. And it doesn't stop there. He begins the process of helping us become the people that he wants us to be as a congregation, as individuals, as families. And he seeks us each day. And he's saying, I'm seeking you. Hey, come to me. When you come to me, you find them already coming towards you. And then, there is this. And it's simply this. At the end of the parable, he says there's more joy in heaven when a sinner comes back. Now, a lot of times in our community, in our country, in North America, and Europe, if there's going to be change in a church, people are coming in, they'll come from another place, or but usually there isn't many conversions. You know what I mean by conversion? Many people coming to Christ. So we don't see that very often. And sometimes we tend to forget how wonderful it is when a person comes to Jesus Christ and becomes our saviors, our brothers and sisters. And so we don't reach out. And when we reach out, we need to remember that when we are reaching out, we're reaching out to our brothers and sisters that we don't know yet. It's kind of neat, isn't it? And to give you an example of how joyful it is, I read a book this summer called Un-Muslim. And there's a man called Nadine, N-A-E-E-N. Probably didn't pronounce it right. But he and his family were Pakistani, and they were in Kuwait, because Pakistan is very, very poor. They could make a good living, and his father was making a good living. But then there was the Iraq War, and they came into Kuwait. They lost everything. But before that happened, they sent one of their sons, Muhammad, to Charleston. And he went to school there. And while he was there, he became a Christian. And he came back to this Nadine, and he told him privately, because if you're a Muslim and you convert to Christianity, your life is in danger. And he didn't think very much of it, but he wasn't doing very well in Kuwait, getting in a lot of trouble. And finally his parents sent him over to Charleston as well. But they didn't realize it was a Christian college they were sending him to. And when he came over, all he was thinking about is blonde women with blue eyes. That's what he says in the book. But Muhammad talked to him, and it was quite a dramatic thing when he became a Christian. And when he did, Muhammad was so full of joy. And then their sister came over, Obia. And when she found out, she was horrified. Because you're leaving just more than faith and religion with Muslims and family are very, very connected. And she was in horror, just horrified. But they prayed for her. And all of a sudden, we're talking to her, and you could see in her face that something had happened. And they said, have you met Jesus? And all she said was, I'm free. And he said to his brother, I haven't got another one. can't pronounce the last daughter's name. But she also was very upset. But she did a lot of thinking about what was happening. She saw the difference in Nadine's life and the lives of her brother and other brother and sister. One day he went into a room and she was crying. She said, "Do you feel the presence of Jesus?" She said, "Yes." And he said, "Has Jesus touched you?" And she said, "Yes, he has." Now, when the parents found out, there wasn't any rejoicing, because it was really, from their point of view, horrible. I told you this simply to let you know that when somebody comes to Christ, there's rejoicing. We should rejoice, and heaven itself rejoices, because Christ has found, sought and found, one of his people. If you haven't been found by Christ, seek him. You'll find he's seeking for you, and rejoice in God's goodness to each of us.